Noble Black News, Africa, caught between China and the West. The growing presence of China in Africa is transforming the continent's political, economic, and strategic landscape. As Chinese trade and investment eclipse those of Europe and the United States, concerns about Beijing's influence, particularly from Western leaders, have grown louder. Critics claim China exploits African resources, threatens local jobs, and strengthens authoritarian regimes, while disregarding human rights, governance, and environmental standards. Yet, African civil society organizations point out the irony of these criticisms, noting that Western powers have long engaged in similar exploitative practices. At Noble Black News, we aim to unpack the complex history and current dynamics shaping Africa's interactions with China and the West, amplifying African voices in this global conversation. The Bond Spirit, a historical context. China's engagement with Africa began during the Cold War, driven by solidarity against colonialism and imperialism. The Bonding Conference of 1955 brought together leaders from Asia and Africa, including representatives from liberation movements, to promote decolonization and economic cooperation. China played a significant role, offering grants, loans, and technical support to African countries resisting neocolonialism. During this period, Beijing supported African liberation movements in Mozambique, Zimbabwe, then Rhodesia, and Zambia. A notable example of this cooperation was the Tanzania-Zambia Railway Authority, TAZARA, which China built to help Zambia export copper without relying on apartheid-era Rhodesia and South Africa. A shift in priorities, from ideals to interests. Following the Cold War, China's focus shifted. Its industrial and economic expansion required raw materials, energy resources, and markets, and Africa became a key partner. The relationship evolved into one that prioritized Beijing's economic and strategic interests, resembling the extractive practices of former colonial powers. By the early 2000s, China had surpassed the US as Africa's largest trading partner. Beijing invested billions in infrastructure, agriculture, telecommunications, and renewable energy, and expanded into industries like healthcare, education, and technology. Noble Black News Spotlight: the good, the bad, and the complex. While China's investments have led to improved infrastructure and job creation in some areas, they come with significant challenges. Debt dependency. African countries owe massive debts to China, but many still owe far more to Western creditors. Chinese loans often lack transparency, which civil society groups criticize as fostering dependency. Worker rights. Chinese firms have been accused of poor labor practices, including low wages, unsafe working conditions, and prioritizing Chinese workers over locals. Environmental and governance issues. Beijing's non-interference policies have bolstered corrupt regimes, allowing resource exploitation while neglecting human rights and environmental protections. At the same time, many African leaders view Chinese loans and projects as opportunities for development, appreciating that Beijing does not impose political or economic reforms as conditions for cooperation. Unlike Western institutions, China's expanding role in security. As China's economic interests in Africa have grown, so has its involvement in security. Historically, Beijing refrained from military engagement, focusing instead on non-combat roles in UN peacekeeping missions. However, this changed with its growing global stature. By 2016, China contributed more personnel to UN missions than any other permanent member of the Security Council, sending troops to Mali, South Sudan, and the Central African Republic. Military bases. In 2017, China established its first overseas military base in Djibouti, strategically located near critical shipping lanes. This facility supports UN anti-piracy efforts, protects Chinese nationals, and safeguards vital trade routes. China's military expansion has raised alarms in the West. but Beijing's involvement remains far smaller than that of the United States, which operates 29 military bases across Africa. A new Cold War. The US and its allies have criticized China's actions in Africa, framing Beijing as an imperialist power. Yet, as Columbia University's Jeffrey Sachs argues, the US itself operates as a hegemon, maintaining over 750 military bases worldwide and engaging in numerous foreign conflicts. In contrast, China's focus has been on economic partnerships, albeit with its own set of challenges. Many African nations are wary of being drawn into a new Cold War. They refuse to choose sides, instead advocating for a multipolar world where their sovereignty is respected. African leaders seek balanced relationships that prioritize their development goals rather than geopolitical rivalries. Noble Black News, elevating African voices. At Noble Black News, we believe that Africa's story must be told from an African perspective. The continent is not merely a playing field for global powers. It is home to over 1.4 billion people with diverse aspirations and priorities. Africa's future depends on partnerships rooted in mutual respect and genuine collaboration. As the West and China compete for influence, African leaders and civil society must steer the conversation, ensuring their voices shape the policies and investments that will determine their destiny. Stay with Noble Black News as we continue to spotlight these critical issues, amplifying the perspectives that matter most. Together, we can celebrate Africa's resilience, innovation, and leadership of a rapidly changing world. Black News, US, China, and the battle for Africa's future. The Biden administration's renewed focus on Africa acknowledges a critical reality.
Fellow leaders and friends, I can't think of a better way to end my trip to Angola than coming here to the Libido Corridor. And I want to thank all of you for being here today, including the President of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Zambia, Tanzania, and our partner, the CEO of the American Finance Corporation. It's great to be here with all of you, and I mean that sincerely. I think we're at one of those transition points in world history, where what we do in the next several years is going to affect what the next 6, 7, 8 decades looks like. I think this is one of those milestones.
The continent is central to addressing global challenges, from economic development to climate change. Yet, as the US re-engages, it faces an uphill battle against China's entrenched influence. For over 2 decades, Beijing has systematically deepened its ties with Africa, making it the continent's largest trading partner and investor. Here's a breakdown of 10 key points on China's role in Africa, its implications for US interests, and how African nations are shaping their relationships with these global powers. 1. The US-Africa Leaders Summit is long overdue. Unlike China, which has held its Forum on China-Africa Cooperation every 3 years since 2000, the US has only held to Africa summits, the first in 2014. This year's summit aims to strengthen US-Africa relations, featuring a business forum that promises tangible outcomes, such as commercial deals between African and US companies. African leaders are optimistic about this engagement, with nearly every invited leader expected to attend. This summit represents a chance for the US to demonstrate its commitment to Africa as a partner, not just a competitor with China. 2. China's 2-decade strategy. China's presence in Africa is not accidental, it is the result of deliberate and sustained effort. From its historical support for liberation movements to its Belt and Road Initiative BRI, China has expanded its influence through infrastructure lending, resource extraction, and commercial partnerships, while countries like Ethiopia, Angola, and Zambia have been focal points. China's reach now spans nearly every African nation, dramatically reshaping the geopolitical landscape. 3. China's economic lead. China dominates US-Africa trade, with $254 billion in 2021, compared to the US's $64 billion. Beijing is also Africa's largest lender and foreign investor, with Chinese businesses creating jobs and funding projects across the continent. For many Africans, China's engagement represents opportunity, though it's not without its controversies, including concerns over debt dependency and environmental impacts. 4. Not all Chinese engagement is a threat. While China's military activities, such as its naval base in Djibouti, raise legitimate U.S. security concerns, not all Chinese projects have national security implications. Chinese-built roads, railways, and hospitals have little bearing on U.S. strategic interests. Mischaracterizing all Chinese activity as threatening risks alienating African nations, which want partnerships, not power struggles. 5. China's role in conflict resolution remains limited. Despite its economic clout, China has largely stayed out of African conflict resolution. While it appointed a special envoy for the Horn of Africa and hosted a peace conference in Ethiopia, its involvement remains minimal compared to the US's active diplomacy. If China shifts its non-interference stance, it could challenge the US's leadership resolving African conflicts. 6. Africa's desire for balanced relationships. Most African nations aim to maintain good relations with both the US and China. Leaders remember the Cold War's proxy conflicts and seek to avoid becoming pawns in another great power rivalry. Rather than forcing African countries to choose sides, US diplomacy must recognize Africa's agency and aspirations for economic growth, security, and sovereignty. 7. Africans want more US engagement. While China's footprint is undeniable, many African leaders see the US as an essential partner, valuing its higher standards for transparency, governance, and environmental practices. American companies, backed by government initiatives like the Development Finance Corporation, have opportunities to engage in sectors such as health, technology, and renewable energy. African leaders are keen to see more US investment that aligns with their priorities. 8. Playing to US strengths. The US excels in sectors like fintech, health innovation, and renewable energy, where its businesses can compete effectively against Chinese counterparts. Additionally, the vibrant African diaspora in the US serves as a bridge for deeper commercial and cultural ties. Moreover, US support for democracy and civil society resonates with many Africans, offering a contrast to China's focus on authoritarian regimes.
The United States will not dictate Africa's choices. Neither should anyone else. The right to make these choices belongs to Africans, and Africans alone.
9. Transparency is key. Africans are increasingly demanding transparency in government dealings, especially concerning large-scale Chinese loans. In Kenya, public scrutiny of a $5 billion railway loan revealed unfavorable terms, sparking calls for accountability. The US, with its emphasis on open business practices, can align with these transparency efforts, fostering trust and strengthening its position. 10. Sustained diplomacy is essential. High-profile events like the US-Africa Leaders Summit are important, but insufficient without consistent follow-up. African nations appreciate personal engagement, yet President Biden has not visited the continent during his tenure. By prioritizing Africa beyond summits and investing in long-term relationships, the US can counterbalance China's influence while respecting African sovereignty. Noble Black News, amplifying Africa's voice. At Noble Black News, we see Africa's evolving partnerships as a critical opportunity for self-determination and growth. The US-China rivalry shouldn't overshadow what Africans truly want: fair trade, sustainable investment, and respect for their agency. Africa is not a battleground, it's a continent of over 1.4 billion people with diverse aspirations. By listening to African leaders and investing in mutual progress, the US can forge meaningful partnerships that honor Africa's role in shaping the global future. Stay tuned to Noble Black News for stories that elevate African perspectives and celebrate the continent's resilience, innovation, and leadership.
Thank you for watching Noble Black News, where we strive to bring you the real stories and perspectives that truly matter. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your community, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest content. Together, let's continue to uncover the untold stories and celebrate the achievements of the global Black community. Stay tuned for more powerful stories. Until next time.